Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little topic that I found very particularly interesting. And this is probably going to be the final topic, at least that I talk about of the day, unless I find anything that pertains to my interest, or who knows, I may record a couple videos today, may release them tomorrow. But, anyways, I thought that I would talk about this final topic. And before I do get into the topic, I did want to thank all the most recent people who have, of course, subscribed to the channel, or have clicked the thumbs up on my videos, or watched the videos in the first place, or leave, of course, their opinions, no matter what they be, down in the comment section below. You guys, of course, certainly are appreciated. And, of course, all in all, I will try to give the best logical and objective content and break things down in the best objective way possible, as always, because, of course, that is the objective over here. But anyways, just to get to the meat of this conversation overall, just to get straight to the point, we're going to be talking about a conversation that pertains to both Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez and that of Floyd Mayweather Jr. And of course, there was a couple of people that told me that, they asked me what my opinions were on this conversation. But not only that, but I was actually planning to talk about this conversation as of yesterday, but for whatever reason, I just could not get around to it. But we're going to get around to it right now. And of course, the rumors that have been growing through the grapevine, at least with certain people, is that, of course, one of the greatest fighters of all time, in my opinion, and probably the greatest fighter, at least of the 2000s, heading into the early 2010s, Mr. Floyd Mayweather Jr., there is rumors, of course, that he could be coming once again back out of retirement, and that maybe he could actually face a ranked contender in boxing. I've heard certain rumors that maybe it's possible that he could face that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. I've heard it possible that maybe he could face that of Errol Spence Jr., or maybe all in all that it's even a possibility that he could have a rematch over Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. Now, do I think that this is very, very likely that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is, going to face one of these guys next? No, I don't personally think that it is very likely. When I take a look at Floyd Mayweather Jr., I think that, I believe now, he's about 45 years old. He may even be a little bit older than that. I'm not necessarily sure when it comes down to it. Actually, now that I think of it, I don't think he is, because the Canelo fight now happened almost 9 years ago. And he was 36 then, so of course now 8 years later, that means that he would have to be 44 years old. So Floyd Mayweather Jr., I believe, is 44 years old at the current moment in time, but this year he's going to be turning 45. Do I think that it would behoove Floyd Mayweather Jr.? Do I think that it would be the smartest idea to go into the ring with someone like a Terrence Bud Crawford, who seems to be at his prime and in very good physical conditioning? Do I think it would be a very good idea to get in the ring with an Errol Spence Jr. or a Canelo Alvarez? No, personally, I don't think that it would be. And that's why, personally, in my opinion, I don't think that Floyd Mayweather Jr., I don't think that he is going to go back into the ring with one of those fighters. And I know that there's been certain rumors through the grapevine and all this sort of stuff, but I just don't see Floyd Mayweather Jr. doing that. I think Floyd Mayweather Jr. is intelligent and smart enough to know that, certain things overall have to end when it comes down to it. And eventually, even if you were very great at something, and Floyd Mayweather Jr., there's a lot of people that would debate, and you certainly could debate, that there was no greater fighter than him. At least there are certain people that would debate that. But at the end of the day, do I believe that Floyd Mayweather Jr., do I believe that there is at least a part of him that has a partial itch to get back into the boxing scene? And do I think that there is a part of him that really, really, really possibly wants to have a rematch against that of Saul Canelo Alvarez? I think that there is a small part of him, maybe even a bigger part of him that I'm not aware of, that he does want to rematch Saul Canelo Alvarez. Like I said, there's a reason, in my opinion, why Floyd Mayweather Jr., as of late, has talked about Canelo Alvarez the way that he has. Because the majority of the things that he has said about Canelo Alvarez, they've usually been derogatory. And I think the main reason why that is because Floyd Mayweather Jr., he's basically looking at Canelo Alvarez the same way that Jerry Rice looks at the wide receivers in the NFL today. Sure, overall, you may surpass me in somewhat of statistics, and you may surpass me in certain, champions beaten and yada, 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 yada. But let's not forget, you played down in a watered down era, or at least that's what Jerry Rice is saying to the wide receivers. Now, Canelo, in terms of boxing, now there's certain generations, in my opinion, that are more watered down than others. But I'm not going to strip that credit away from Canelo. I believe that he has defeated great champions, a multitude of them, when it comes down to it. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. But Floyd Mayweather Jr., I think, realizes that later on, and I've been saying this for a few months now, that Floyd Mayweather Jr. realizes that there is going to be an eventual push for Canelo Alvarez to not only be the greatest Mexican boxer of all time and the greatest fighter of this era, but whenever you have a fighter that is looked at as the best of an era, they're going to be in that debate as the greatest fighter of all time. It just is what it is. Floyd Mayweather Jr., that's why he's trying to do so much, in my opinion, to somewhat say, well, Canelo, he can do this, 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 and this, but he's never going to surpass me. And Floyd Mayweather Jr., he has every right to say that. He has a right to his opinion. Floyd Mayweather Jr., of course, in my opinion, is one of the 10 greatest boxers in boxing history. So he has the right to his opinion. But at the end of the day, Floyd Mayweather Jr., just like Juan Manuel Marquez, just like Marco Antonio Barrera, just like they seen with Canelo Alvarez several years ago, they knew that Canelo Alvarez one day was going to be on top of the sport. They seen something in Canelo Alvarez that not a lot of other people seen at the time. And only certain boxers overall, only great boxers, could have seen that possibility, I think, in Canelo Alvarez. That's why Marquez always had a distaste for Canelo Alvarez, because people were already trying to compare Canelo to some of the greater fighters. And I think once Marquez seen Canelo Alvarez beat Miguel Cotto, I think that's when he finally said, you know what, this kid is even greater than I once originally thought. And that's pretty much what I thought when he completely outboxed Miguel Cotto. Because for a lot of you overall that did not have the pleasure or, the privilege to watch Miguel Cotto during his prime, Miguel Cotto was not just a dude that will get in a war with you. He actually was one of the smartest boxer punchers, in my opinion, that I've personally ever seen. Now, would I put Miguel Cotto in my top 10 or anything? No, not necessarily, not of all time. But Cotto, he would probably just make my list of top 50 fighters of all time. Like I said, he's up there, in my opinion, with Sugar Shane Mosley, Oscar De La Hoya, Morales, Barrera, Marquez, Bernard Hopkins, maybe Joe Calzaghe if you want to throw him in there. All those fighters, in my opinion, you put them in pretty much the same table. It just is what it is, or you put them in the same group. But the bottom line being is this: do I think that it is likely that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going to rematch that of a solo Canelo Alvarez? No, I don't think it's likely at all. I'm not saying it's impossible. I give it maybe about a 5% chance of happening, but I don't give it any more than that. The reason why I say that is because maybe I could see a slight chance if Canelo Alvarez, if it really does bother him to this day, and I think that Canelo Alvarez, that, it does bother him somewhat to this day, but I think Canelo Alvarez has found a way to convince himself, and I think overall that he's found a way to convince his fans and the public that the reason why I lost to Floyd Mayweather Jr. was because I was 23 years old and he was the number one pound-for-pound fighter at the time. Now, whether you think that that's an excuse or not is up to you. Listen, what I'll say is this: when Floyd Mayweather Jr., in my opinion, beat that of a solo Canelo Alvarez, I think that solo Canelo Alvarez was still one of the best fighters in the world. So, of course, to say that Floyd Mayweather Jr. beat a version of Canelo where Canelo was just, completely inexperienced and all sort of stuff, of course we can't say something like that. But is there maybe a slight bit of truth to where maybe we could say something like maybe Floyd Mayweather Jr., even though he did fight Canelo during his prime years, maybe he did not fight him necessarily when he was at his most dangerous or overall when he was at his peak. Because I would say that Floyd Mayweather Jr., yes, you fought Canelo when he was in his prime, but I would not necessarily say that you fought him at his peak. Now, even if these two were to fight peak v peak, if this was a Floyd Mayweather Jr., whoever you think is the best version of Floyd, to be honest with you, it may be that 2013 version of Floyd for me. Yes, that Floyd Mayweather Jr. overall didn't have as much power as what the pretty boy Floyd did, but at the end of the day, that is the most defensively responsible and intelligent version of Floyd Mayweather Jr. that I've personally ever seen. It was around that 2012 to 2013 years, in my opinion. It was around there. I think that Floyd Mayweather Jr., in terms of if they were to ever peak v peak fight, I think that Floyd might be one of those few boxers. He might be one of the 5 boxers, at least that just comes to mind, maybe even fewer than that if they were to actually face Canelo Alvarez one-on-one, without a weight drain, I may favor Floyd Mayweather Jr. slightly, or I maybe would favor him to beat Canelo, just because of the type of style that he has, just because of the slickness and the defense, and the fact that it would be hard, I think, for Canelo Alvarez to completely outbox that of a Mayweather or beat him because he's such a hard target to hit. And on top of that, he's smaller when it comes down to it. He's faster than Canelo Alvarez. He has quicker feet. So at the end of the day, I would say that Mayweather, yes, in my opinion, he probably would be greater than that of a Canelo Alvarez. And you certainly could argue that maybe, in your opinion, he will always be greater than a Canelo Alvarez. But what their PR team is going to do and what Canelo Alvarez's team is basically just going to allege and what they're going to do, all they're going to do is just allege that, well, Canelo Alvarez, yes, he did lose to Floyd Mayweather Jr. and quite dominantly, but he basically was a pup. He was a puppy. He was 23 years old. He had not even gone really into a second weight class competitively. And when I say competitively, I'm talking about to win his second, or a world title in a second weight class when it came down to it. That's basically all they're going to try to do. And a lot of people are going to eat that up. Now, once again, whether you think that's an excuse or not, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think maybe you can debate that it's a partial excuse, but you maybe can also debate that there is some truth to it. And I think that that is the most logical way looking at things. Listen, what I'll say is this. I don't think that it's really going to behoove Canelo Alvarez to really take this fight either. Because what does Canelo Alvarez really have to gain from taking this fight? You're going to be facing a fighter overall that is going to be going on 45 years old this year. If you beat him, are the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fans and a certain amount of people really going to give you that much credit for defeating a 45-year-old Floyd Mayweather Jr.? I'm sure there's going to be that small percentage of people that do, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people that say you beat a 45-year-old man who hasn't competed in professional boxing against a real ranked professional boxer in a really, really, really long time. So on top of that, and Canelo, if somehow he ends up losing it, which at this point I don't think that he more than likely would, but Floyd Mayweather Jr. also, if I had to guess, if the Canelo Alvarez fight were to happen, more than likely Floyd Mayweather Jr. would basically try to say, I am the A side, and if you're going to have a rematch with me since I beat you before, this is going to be my terms once again, because I proved that I was the better fighter in our match those several years ago. And more than likely, what that would entail is another weight drain or another rehydration clause, and I just don't think that Canelo Alvarez will be able to do that overall at an appropriate weight at this time, and I don't think that Canelo Alvarez would even agree to that, at least if he knew what was good for him. So I don't think, all in all, that this rematch is necessarily necessary. I don't think overall that it's really good for either fighter. I think that Floyd Mayweather Jr. should stay out of professional boxing. And I think, to be honest with you, I think that he's smart enough to know that. And I don't see him going back into professional boxing. This could be a stunt overall, maybe to just promote his next fight. So people all know, or maybe they watch it and say, maybe we'll see how great Floyd Mayweather Jr. looks. Do I think that there's a part of him that, of course, wants to compete again? Absolutely. Because once again, when you're as great as what a Floyd Mayweather Jr. was, or overall, when you were even a professional boxer at one point in time, I don't think that the competitive spirit ever leaves you completely. Especially when you were an all-time great like what a Floyd Mayweather Jr. was, or like a Chavez Sr., or a Duran, or a Hearns, or a Hagler, or a Pacquiao, or any of those fighters, or at the current moment in time, a Canelo Alvarez. That competitive fight spirit, if you're truly interested in the sport, most boxers that are all-time greats, they were obsessed with what they did. It's just like other great athletes as well. Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal, they are obsessed with what they do. When you take a look at Tom Brady, he is obsessed with football. When you take a look at LeBron James, he is obsessed with basketball. So those guys, they never truly overall want to retire, but eventually when the reflexes and the speed and the strength, eventually when it starts to wane, they overall need to know when to call it quits. And most athletes don't. Most athletes, when it comes down to it, they basically have to get whooped into submission when it comes down to it to realize, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. And the last time I seen Floyd Mayweather Jr. in the boxing ring, even against Conor McGregor, he didn't look like he had anywhere near the same reflexes or speed or feet as he once did. You can tell that the muscle memory is still there. You can tell all in all that he's still a very decent boxer. And is there some ring boxers out there that maybe he could potentially beat? It's very possible. But would I bet on him to beat Canelo Alvarez at this point in time in his career when he's 45 years old pretty much? And on top of that, Canelo, if he were to not have a weight drain and Canelo Alvarez were to be at full weight and pretty much in his peak prime position? No, but it is what it is. But we'll see all in all what happens. I doubt Floyd Mayweather Jr. is going to come back out of retirement to face an actual legitimate 50-50 threat in boxing. That's not me sliding Floyd Mayweather Jr. That's just me saying I think Floyd overall knows what's good for him. And what's not good for him, in my opinion, is coming back in professional boxing and actually testing that, especially when you're 45 years old. Because that is going to hurt your brand if you're Floyd Mayweather Jr., if you go back into professional boxing and you lose a fight. A big part of Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s brand is not just because he was one of the greatest fighters of his generation, probably the greatest fighter of his generation, but also because he was undefeated. That's why a lot of fighters, when it comes down to it, they also try to kind of recreate that same brand with themselves being undefeated. Floyd Mayweather Jr., he was one of the beginners of that when it comes down to it. It was almost like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, with the way that he played in the 90s, kind of overall with individual hero ball at times, even though eventually, of course, he learned how to play within a system and play within a team game. There was a bunch of people who were influenced by him and who didn't have the skill set and who didn't have the intelligence of him overall. They basically tried to be like Mike, whether it be Tracy McGrady or Vince Carter or Allen Iverson, yada, 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 yada. Kobe Bean Bryant, those guys. That's why so many of those guys, even though they were highly, highly skilled, when you take a look at their proficiency, it was nowhere near what a Michael Jordan was. Because they always tried to play individual scoring basketball, but when it came down to it, they never usually had the skill set of a Michael Jordan. They didn't have the basketball IQ either. So it is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it, that's pretty much my opinion on the situation. It would be very interesting to see if Floyd Mayweather Jr. actually would come out of retirement. I just don't think that he's going to. Why do that when you basically already proved to yourself in your career? And on top of that, when it comes down to it, why risk yourself in a really, really, really dangerous situation when you're 45 years old? And on top of that, you can get $10 million by just facing people in exhibition fights continually. So it just is what it is. So I don't see Floyd Mayweather Jr. coming out of retirement. I do not think that it is realistic. But we will see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.